All right, real quick rundown on how to do the experiment part of this lab. So you've got your saucepan, you've got your 1.5 cups of sugar, and then you're going to get your 1/2 cup of water. And before you pour that water in, you're going to get ready to seed your stick. So remember, that's going to help the rock candy grow much faster than if you would just put this stick in plain. The crystals attract each other, and so the process works out much better if you add this stick with a little bit of sugar kind of already on it. Okay, so we dip it in the water before we put it in, and then we dip that in the sugar so it has some good crystals going on, and then just set this aside until it's time to use it. Pour that water in and stir it up, and then you crank it up to 7 medium and let it boil. Okay, so you're going to bring it to a boil. That means you don't start timing that 2 minutes until it's actually begun boiling. And you're just going to stir it a few times until it boils. When it gets to that boiling point, you time it for 2 minutes, no stirring. Okay, that part's important. You got to let it do its thing. So I'll be back here in a second to show you what to do after this has been boiling for 2 minutes. Real quick, this is simmering, tiny bubbles barely breaking on the surface. That's not boiling yet. Okay, let it go a little bit more till all those bubbles can cover the entire surface, like those are all the way across and they're breaking rapidly. Then you start timing your 2 minutes. All right, we've been boiling for about a minute. Remember, you do not stir it when it's boiling. Just let it boil. In the meantime, you get your plate prepared for your anchor for the seated stick. So just kind of this little small plate. You don't want a big opening in the center because you want it to anchor the stick and not let it flop all the way around. Don't stab yourself with the scissors, okay? So just get a little slit in there that's about the width of your popsicle stick. And then you're gonna set it up so you're ready with your partner to hold your cup. You will have actual styrofoam cups, but I need to get those still. So we're just gonna use this guy for visual. And you have these tongs that kind of have that curved vibe going on to hold the cup better. You're not gonna do this and hold it up. You have it, I want you to have it on the counter. So I can't get, like, actually set it down. Don't hold it up while your partner's pouring, or do it over the sink, set it down in the sink. But keep it on a flat surface, and then they can pour it, and you're just stabilizing the cup as it's poured in. Okay, it's in my cup here. It's still very hot. Be careful, please. Get that on your skin. It will not be great because it's not something that can rinse off easily. It's a sticky situation. Okay, so be careful with that. But now I'm ready, like the recipe says, to put my first 2 ingredients into the cup, or I'm sorry, into the blender before I add my syrup. When it comes to yogurt, if you give it a good shake before you open it, even like your little yogurt containers, that'll kind of pre-mix it if there's any liquid that's kind of separated on top. That's just a tip, pro tip. Then you go ahead and measure that out into your dry measuring cup. I know it's kind of a liquidy thing, but it's one of those things that you would want to use a dry measuring cup for so that you could scrape it off and level it. And then that goes in. And then your liquid of choice, so when you're making a smoothie, it's kind of one of those things. It doesn't really need a recipe. You can just kind of add whatever it is you have, depending on what you like your smoothie to be like as far as texture and consistency goes. So I'm going to put milk in this one, but I think what I'll have available is maybe some soy milk and some different maybe flavors of juices. We'll see what is on sale at the store. Now that I have my first two ingredients, I'm just going to get in there. Remember, this is hot. You just scoop out 1/4 of that solution, approximately. If it's a little low, don't panic. This is just your flavoring agent. And then you get that into your mixture. All of the things that come in contact with that syrup should be submerged in hot water in order for cleanup to be easier. You're going to regret it at the end if you don't. Okay, so throw that. My pan's already in my sink, filled completely with water. And then I'm going to stick that container or that measuring cup in there to soak also. Okay, up next in our recipe, we have some of the other more frozen or solid ingredients. So we're going to throw our blueberries in. And then we're going to do our frozen banana. which some people get freaked out by, okay? Don't panic. This banana is fine. It just looks a little strange because it's been oxidized or it's been in the freezer. When you freeze bananas at that stage of like really perfect ripeness, that's the kind of stuff you want to use for baking or throwing in your smoothies. And like we saw earlier, throwing those frozen things in your smoothie helps you not to have to add so much ice, which would then water your smoothie down and make it not as flavorful. Okay, so you just kind of pare that skin away. If there's any stuff that's hanging on, just we've pared the skin off things before, so that's how you get those off. Break this guy in half. He doesn't need to be cut into pieces. Now in your recipe, you're going to add the spinach. I don't have spinach right now, so I'm going to throw in a couple chunks of broccoli. Remember, this is that way that you can sneak in those vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, all kinds of good stuff in vegetables that you don't necessarily like to eat, but you still need that stuff in your body. You'll never know that it's in there. I promise. You got to believe me. The broccoli's a little stronger in flavor. That's why we use the spinach, but both are power foods and have all of that good stuff for you to consume. And then finally, is the ice. That always goes in last so that you don't create a frozen solid iceberg structure on the top of your blender blade, which would then jam the blender, okay? Bring this guy over, and when you put the lid on, give it a good solid press. Make sure it's down and on completely. And a good rule of thumb anytime you're using a blender is to pulse a couple times. Usually there's a P or the word pulse, a button that doesn't stay on unless you actually hold it down. Okay, so you push it a few times to make sure everything's moving, and then you go ahead and fire it up. We're going to use like a medium setting. So again, 7. So turn it on and then hit 7. And you let it run until you think it looks smooth enough or creamy, or the chunks of blueberry are smaller. You don't see any big, large pieces of ice. I mean, you can't really over blend it, but you can definitely under blend it. So once you think it's done, give it a couple more seconds, and then you turn it off, and there you go. You'd have this blender. I'm going to pour this out. I'm going to drink some of this, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to clean the blender properly. That's another misconception. But real quick, before we go onto that, don't forget about this guy. So here's our cup. Here's our seated stick. You're going to need to do some teamwork on this one and have one person hold the stick in the center of the cup while the other person lines up, and I'm making it look harder than it needs to be, lines up that opening on your plate. Okay, so that way you have that submerged in there, and it's just going to sit and grow rock candy for a couple days. The plate will seal it up, and this needs to remain undisturbed in order for that process to work. So you just want to very carefully set this off to the side of your kitchen. Make sure that the cup is labeled so we know whose is whose. All right, I'll be back blender cleaning. All right, so when you clean the blender, you basically let it clean itself, okay? This is a clean blender because I'm gonna save that batch I just made. I'm gonna smuggle some kids in here and see if they can detect the secret ingredient, because I know some of you don't believe me when I say you won't be able to tell that it's in there. And this one turned out really good. So I'll do that here in a second, but imagine this was dirty. You just give it a rinse. If there's any large amount of any of the smoothie left, dump that out, rinse it out, and then you fill it up about halfway with water. Don't overthink the halfway part. And you give it like 1 or 2 squirts of soap. That is it. If you over soap the situation, you're going to have a volcano of soap coming out of the top of your blender and leaking down into the base, which is electronic. You don't want to do that. That will fry the blender and definitely make me mad. Okay, stick this guy on here. So it's cleaning itself. It's cleaning the bottom of the lid. Pretty good too. Let that run until it seems like nothing else is kind of sticking to it. And then you take this over and you give it a good rinse out and you let it dry. Actually, this is the one dish that I would allow you to leave behind in the drying rack for the next group to come in, because it's really difficult to dry the entire blender with the blades at the bottom and to do that safely, okay? So you rinse off the blender, rinse off the lid, don't forget about him, make sure nothing got left behind, and then just leave that upside down to dry. Sometimes people have a misconception that you need to take this part off and clean it. No, that is wrong. Every time you do that, you're breaking the seal of the gasket that's in there to keep it from leaking. You're loosening it and inevitably ruining the life of your blender in a much faster period of time. So you do not remove this. You just do that soap smoothie method. All right, I'm gonna go find some kids to see if they can come in here and detect the secret ingredient. All right, so these are the guys who are gonna try the smoothie and decide what's in it. Okay, let me mix it up again quick. What is your name? Connor. I know you. I thought that was you, but you got your haircut or something. Yeah, you look a little different. Okay, Connor and Ryan. All right, tell me what you think of it. I mean, obviously, visually, you probably tell some things. Banana. Yes. Blueberry. Yes. Yeah. Anything else? Just banana. Are you a banana? You like banana usually? I really like banana. Yeah, so you can taste it pretty quickly. Is it? I mean, what do you think of it? That's pretty good. Except for the banana part. Yeah, it's not bad. Broccoli. Broccoli? Yeah. Really? You don't taste it at all, right? No indication of broccoli. Why would I put broccoli in this smoothie right now? I don't like it. Not to mess with your head, but why would I do that? I don't make it healthy. Right, but without you have to actually be eating broccoli. Okay, that's all I needed from you guys. Prove my point because they never believed me.